So one of the first things we want to really look at in both a chart of a man and a woman is the moon. And the moon is a feminine planet. It's the capacity to be receptive. And we want to look and see how receptive the person is. And that's for a man or a woman. Because one of the things that happens when we get in a relationship is we need to be able to, feel the other person's heart. And we need to be present. We need to be able to receive. And you want to see the quality of what the person receives or what they're open to receive. And you see that from the moon. It's like a capacity to be receptive. And that's why it's so important. Even in relationship astrology, we put a lot of importance on the moon when we look at the nakshatras once we get into the Kuta scoring, because the moon is really the heart of the two people interacting. And there are a couple principles, like for instance, you want to see that the man's moon comes before the woman's moon. Again, this is one of those masculine feminine principles, that the shortest distance is from the man's moon to the woman's, because that shows that the man is in the emotionally initiating role. When it's reverse, the woman is always initiating. This is when we get into the synastry, you'll see this, or when we get into the kutas, but just in a general sense, you want to see how the person's moon is oriented. Someone who has moon Saturn might be kind of closed, but have a lot of commitment, for instance. Once they do receive something, they really stick with it, but they might be pretty closed and kind of fearful. Moon Mars, like let's say if it's a conjunction or aspect in their chart, Moon Mars could be kind of aggressive, right? Moon Venus, loving and accommodating. Moon Jupiter, inspired, but maybe kind of exaggerating things. Moon Mercury, kind of analytical. This is how it might relate with other planets. But then, you want to look at the prominence of the moon. Is the moon in the first house? Is it in the sixth house, the eighth house, fourth house? The moon has a lot of strength, what's called directional strength. So you just want to assess the moon relative to all of these factors. Of course, the sign the moon is in. And if you notice, I talk about the sign last. But the sign the moon is in is important. And of course, the moon is a feminine sign. The moon's a feminine planet. So when it's in a feminine sign, it's going to be more introspective. The moon does well in earth signs. Of course, its exaltation sign is Taurus. You want to see what these things mean. Moon does well in Cancer, Pisces as well. Scorpio, not so much, where it's debilitated. But those are the feminine signs. If it's in a masculine sign, you'll see that the moon will have more either fiery or, airy qualities. So you want to get a feel for what the person is going to be receptive to in general. And you want to have... And again, this is just in an individual's chart. This is where you see, notice the moon in your chart or in people's charts that that you've looked at. Notice how so many of their partners have a quality where you can see, this is why, all their partners have this, like let's say their moon is in an air sign where they are funny and they love to talk to the partner and they're very light and they like to have fun, or they might have a lot of partners, that they meet their partners at, the ballet or, whatever. The air it's very much about fun, and enjoyment, pleasure, happiness in that sense, but it might be a little shallow. As soon as it's not fun anymore, it doesn't feel so good, for example. So all of these are very deep principles, and I can't teach every principle, but the deeper you understand things like the elements, the deeper you understand a fire sign, the more you'll get out of this. Fire sign, it has to be, passionate and interplay. Notice how, if you know someone who has the moon in a fire sign, notice how all their partners, they have this kind of intensity with them, because that's what they're used to. That's what feels natural to them. So it's important to understand that's what the moon is. The moon is what feels natural to us. And we naturally are drawn to people whose energy feels natural to us. And again, it's a very specific thing. And even if there's good synastry or something like that, even if there's good high Kuta points, you still want to notice what the moon, what the moons of the person, what each individual is doing. And you'll see how a person's nature and what they like to receive, what they're comfortable receiving, how they're used to feeling life. That's what the moon is, how life feels to us. A very simple but deep way. We want to experience that. When someone mirrors it back, we feel like, I understand that person. So, and again, but this is our tendency. As I say, things that interfere with that, aspects to the moon, difficulties with the moon, show that we tend to see things, like I said, if Saturn is there, we tend to see things, and just our perspective is, gotta be careful. You never know. Watch yourself. You know, if Mars has joined the moon, you gotta watch it. You gotta defend yourself. And you know, if Venus has joined the moon, everything is nice, and I want to be happy all the time. Or so you might see a person has Venus on the moon, and all their partners, you notice they're all like Libras or Taurus people, or they all have moon in the first house, or they all have Venus in the first house or something. You'll notice this, again, because I've looked at a lot of charts. I've seen how it's so obvious why we keep choosing some version of a, not the same partner, but there's so many things that are in common with all of our partners. And that's what it is. The thing is us. So the first thing is look at the moon. It shows what we naturally are drawn to, what naturally feels good to us. And when we see that and feel that, it's like, that outer creature is providing something that feels natural to me. I want to receive that. And the moon is very primal. It's like refers to our childhood. It refers to things very deep that we don't control, or that we are just really native to us. It's kind of like a default sort of feeling that we have. So you always want to assess that, and all caveats are at play. Like I said, it's often somewhat helpful to have a man's moon in a fire or air sign, in a masculine sign, woman's moon in an earth or water sign. So again, because we're talking about gender, men, when you see a man who has his moon in a fire or air sign, then it's congruent with his gender. Because men, again, they want to initiate. So when the moon is in a masculine sign, there's more of an emotional initiation. It's more likely. It's not always, again, you can't just base it on this, but at least as far as emotional, interplay, moon in a masculine sign will be more initiating around feelings. Moon in a feminine sign will be more receptive. So it's not to say that's everything, but it's something to notice for sure. Like I said, there's always that gender component when you're talking about relationships, because that's what we're doing in relationships. So moon, probably the first thing to really look at and notice as far as an individual's capacity. Rahu Ketu on the moon can be difficult. So again, you'll notice this is a default thing that we bring into our life, and then we kind of find it in a lot of people that we have. Check out the moon first.